folks. Welcome to the last August of 2023 Aries Working Group call for August 30th. Glad you're here. We have some cool topics today and some progression that we have made in the process of resolving the unqualified did issue. Some good stuff. Also, peer notifications is a discussion on the horizon. And so that stuff's going on. I will drop the chat. Did we enable this thing so that people that can join can see back chat items yet? Do we know if we did that? Anyway, I will continue to repost as people join. So the link to the agenda is in the chat. You're welcome to add yourself to the attendees list or any other useful changes to the community on the wiki meeting agenda. This is a Hyperledger call, and so the antitrust policy and the code of conduct are in effect. This helps us be excellent to each other and solves legal issues that may encumber our work. Is there anyone new today that would like to introduce themselves and say hello and tell us what you're doing? All right, we're glad you're here. You're always welcome to do so in the future. Announcements. We have a collection here. So we're getting to the end of August here, and so I think the vacation pauses for AFJ and Bifold may be coming to a close. And then Stephen, you have the did WebS did method link here. Any quick commentary on that?
Just that we're continuing to make progress. The repo is getting merges. Activity is going on as far as an implementation. And meetings are now happening Friday mornings, 25 hours from now. So an hour later than this call on Fridays.
Set your clocks, folks. 25 hours starting now.
Well,
actually,
starting
10 minutes ago. Sorry, my joke was poorly timed.
Ooh.
Also, we have an Indie Summit this week, Stephen?
Next week, yeah. Thursday.
Next week.
The hour before this on Thursday. Actually, yeah, it's not 25 hours from now. It's 48 hours. Never mind. Let's not even go there. The Indie Summit is September 7th.
7th?
Uh-huh.
And that's a Thursday, right?
Yes, Thursday at 6 Pacific, which is 3 p.m. in Central Europe.
Okay. Do you have a link for that?
I've got a registration link that I can add, yeah.
Oh, perfect. So we have lots of crossover with this community in Indy. That's that is going on next week.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good. Any other announcements we should have on our list, but don't. When's the next Internet Identity Workshop? We're getting there. Load. October 10th is the next IIW. We've heard this pitch a million times, but if you have not been to IIW and you are able to make it, it is a pretty great experience for all sorts of related topics, and we would love to have you there. That's in Mountain View, California. That's an in-person. Great. Any other announcements? Any projects want to share, a release status or a work update?
Yeah, so Akapai 0.10.1 was released yesterday. A notice is to go out based on the change log entry that I've linked in the text there. We had some fun times with PyPy. For some reason, it thought one of the distribution files for 0.10.0 already existed, presumably because it already existed somehow. We don't know how, but anyway, so we had to do a 0.10.1 to make sure that both of the artifacts got published properly on PyPy. So that was done yesterday. So 0.10.1 is the current version of Akapai. And as I say, the changelog entry's got the updates on it. Some very good work done on did handling and making it so that it's much more flexible in establishing, for example, using different types of DIDs for DIDCOM connections and things like that. Lots of good stuff in that one.
Cool.
We are also upgrading to poetry as of tomorrow or as of now in Akapai versus pip. So I don't know how that actually affects others, but that has happened. The merge occurred.
Excellent. Other work updates folks want to share?
I don't see folks from VCX and Framework JavaScript, but there is lots of work going in both of those communities and those frameworks. So if you're not paying attention, take a look at what's happening, because there's just lots of improvements and bringing all of the Aries implementations to sort of a common ground. So it's good to see.
Excellent. Cool. All right. Discussion topics today. We'll have a quick marketing update, and then we have some discussion of DID rotation for DIDCOM v1, as well as DID peer 4, which might be the first time you're hearing about this. Daniel Bloom will talk about that. And then after we clean up sort of those related family of discussions, we plan to start a push notification discussion that will likely carry over into next week as well. But that is going to be that'll be a great discussion as well. Any adjustments to the agenda we want to make before we get going? All right, Helen or Alex? I see an Alex.
Yes, hi. I'll give a short marketing update. First of all, we have the draft wiki page. It's now got to a near final version, so we're looking to make that live in the coming week, and we'll let you know when that's in place. We're also taking a slightly longer description from that wiki page and going to liaise with Hyperledger to add that to the Aries landing page on the Hyperledger website. So that's just a small text addition to make that page a bit more substantial. That will go, if you look at the actually that link there, the hyperledger.org link, it will go below the calls to action at the bottom of the page. There's some support information. Yeah, if you scroll down a bit from there, I think it'll either be above or below that blue panel there with the download the code. I'm not exactly sure the positioning. I think probably above, so we leave the calls to action at the bottom. So below those 3 stats. Yeah. So that's something we're going to get in place as well, because that's already text that's been shared and gathered feedback on. So we're going to beef up this page to add to the improved description you can see there already. And then if you could flip back to the 2 meeting agenda, thank you. And then we're going to explore a resource for, as you mentioned before, a short Aries introductory animated video. We have, and I'm talking, I can bring the script writing, and we got the voice itself part of the video, but we just need to see if we can get some resource to use one of the many animated video tools available on the internet for making a short, like less than 2-minute introduction to Aries that's suitable both for an exec audience and new devs coming in, just conceptually what's going on and the key moving parts and why we're different. So kind of taking the key things you put in that text and turning it into a video form for easy consumption. And there's enough tools out there that we can do this really affordably. I think in low dollars from somewhere, we could just get somebody who's got those skills, rather than, even though they're quite easy to use, I know that I drive myself somewhat crazy trying to learn that from scratch. So we're going to look into getting that. I think Hyperledger may be able to help us out with that. So watch this space on that. And then finally, this is all based on some discussion we had yesterday, which is the last Tuesday of the month as the marketing working group. Everyone's welcome to join last Tuesday every month, and bring any, if you want to, advance the great the cause of the great ship Aries, or you want to contribute in some way, or you have a suggestion as to how we could be improving how we talk about Aries to the world, then of course reach out in the meantime to Helen and myself, but also you're welcome to come to that meeting, and there's the link. That's the fourth bullet point there.
Absolutely, and that's useful for not just marketing folks, but for like biz dev folks or sales folks that are talking with lots of customers and would like input or have feedback on how Aries is perceived. It would be very useful there.
All welcome in the meantime as well. My email address is in the notes on top of this page as well. So yeah, reach out anytime, and to myself or Helen.
Excellent. Thank you for your work there. Okay. Next up, we have did rotation for didcom v1. This is a topic that I brought up last week, but now I've actually turned this into a PR to the Aries RFC repo. But wait, Sam, aren't we supposed to put these things on didcom.org now? And the answer is, well, yes, but did rotate 1 is of particular interest to the Aries community because we are the largest implementers of didcom v1, and while we'll link it from didcom.org, actually having the protocol here makes lots of sort of community organization sense, since we're going to be the ones most actively working on that. And of course, didcom protocols can be created anywhere, which is why we have the feature on didcom.org that allows linking to occur. So that's why this is done in an Aries RFC. This is a pretty straightforward. There's only a couple of messages here. Our discussion last week prompted some additions, which I'll get to in a second. The idea is that there is a did rotate message, which informs the other party that the rotating party, the one sending this particular message, plans to switch to a new did, and this is the notification of it. There's some notes about didcom v1 and didcom v2 and the lack of a signature as well. There's an issue that we can talk about that kind of relates to the did exchange protocol as well. But we'll get through here. So here's the original message you send. So Alice wants to use a new did in her relationship with Bob. Alice sends this message with the new did she plans to use. And it's worth noting, given the context of this larger discussion, that the did may be in fact just a reformulation of using the same keys that already exist in the relationship. That's okay, but there should not be an assumption that is actually the case. So if you do that, that's fine. But the receiving party, the observing party here, should not assume that the same keys are actually in play, and should do whatever work is necessary to resolve and evaluate the did that's being passed in order to make that occur. And so that there's a note here in the text about that. There's two outcomes of this. One is an ACK. If the observing party receives this message and says, and everything's good and groovy, they can send an ACK back that says, "Yep, got it. Thanks for the note." And then further messages, will from either party will then use the new did that has been discussed in this. That's the happy path. We discussed some unhappy paths last time, and so this did not render well, at least in this preview. But there are two types of problems that can occur when you're doing this. It's possible, for example, that Alice sends Bob notifications she intends to rotate to a did that Bob is not capable of supporting. The did method is not supported, and that would be a problem in the relationship, because now Bob is unable to use the new did that Alice has requested. And so sending a problem report back, this is adopted into the did rotate protocol here, with the did as subject, and then the appropriate description here is good. And this didn't get updated as well, but this this is just the regular message ID, but we're using the parent thread to link it back to the rotate message as well. The other method is that you, in theory, support the did method, but something else was unresolvable about the did. So in the processing or attempting to resolve the did, some other error occurred and you're unable to have that information. And so that's another one that could, of course, cause a problem. And both of those can be indicated here. If a problem report is sent, then the rotation does not complete at all, and a future rotation managed in its own thread would need to be attempted again in order to let that occur. And so there's a little bit of discussion about the differences between how it works in DIDCOM v1 and v2. DIDCOM v2 is a post rotate, meaning that it is rotated and then messages are sent. That is more efficient, but requires a little bit of a different processing model that seemed unwise to inject back into DIDCOM v1, which is why we have a post rotate operation, meaning rather a pre-rotate, where you are having a discussion about the rotation prior to it actually occurring. And so the planning there is a little bit different, but the goal is to make the implementation of this as simple as possible. This does solve the problem nicely of having to, as a community, all rotate to a single did method off of the unqualified dids. It also, and this is some wisdom of Daniel Bloom, I'll blame him for this, it nicely solves the process of actually rotating to DIDCOM v2. The best way to rotate or to begin using DIDCOM v2 is simply to inspect the did documents of the dids that you communicate with, and you can detect via the difference in service endpoint types whether they support DIDCOM v1 or DIDCOM v2, and then you can of course automatically begin using those when you're communicating with the other party. But this is a problem if you're using a did that is not updatable, because you have that problem. And this allows, so the rotate method also is used in this case, where if you begin supporting DIDCOM v2, then you can of course just rotate to an updated did that includes that, whether it's a whole nother did method or whether it's simply a different still like a peer did, but that also includes that endpoint information. So that's a brief overview of did rotation. There was, before I open up for a note here, Ariel added a comment and said, is it really necessary to include the to did in the ACK? Or, we're already referencing the thread, should we just do that? And so this is kind of an open question I have for the group here. It is redundant to include in the ACK the to did as well. And in theory, this we didn't show an example, but we could show this referring to the thread ID here. And so I'm curious what folks think about that level of redundancy. Do we include the thread and the to did? Do we leave it just with to did or just with thread? Thoughts and opinions, please, about this message design.
Just a question. How does this work with mediation? Like if the mediator only supports DIDCOM v1 versus DIDCOM v2?
It's the responsibility of the party when you're rotating to make sure that the mediator you're referencing is capable of routing the message types that you are indicating in the did document. But incidentally, you could also use this did rotation to actually move mediators. If you're using a mediator and you want to move that, you can send them an updated did document that contains the new mediator information. Does that make sense, Colton? Was that a complete enough answer?
Yep, that's a complete enough answer. That makes a lot of sense. It was just a concern that I thought of.
Excellent. Other thoughts or questions or opinions about the ACK message and what we contain in them?
So to just think out loud for a moment about the implication of including the to did in the ACK, that presents a new error condition where you say, if the to did in the ACK didn't actually match the to did that you sent out in the rotate message, that we would also need to account for the ability to send a problem report back and say, hey, that wasn't the did that I gave you.
You rotated to some totally other random did. Wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if that's something that we want to consider just categorically impossible, then if we expressed it by an acknowledgement by just including the thread of the original rotate message, then that's maybe an error condition that we don't need to consider.
I think that's wise. So that's a vote for not including the to did, but simply just referencing the thread ID in order to avoid that particular error condition.
Yep.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, and also for the implementation, I think it will be easier because in other protocols we are usually just using the thread and probably the status, but not including custom fields on the ACK messages.
Sounds like modifying this to only include the thread ID and not the two-did is the right answer. Anyone have any final comments?
Sam, what happens if the peer doesn't support the did rotate protocol?
That can be discovered with, well, so it'll be ignored, first of all, because that's the standard behavior is that if you don't understand a message, you can return a problem report or ignore it, which means that if Alice wants to rotate their did, sends it to Bob, and Bob doesn't respond at all because it doesn't support the protocol, then Alice is still stuck using the same did. That can be discovered in advance with the discover features protocol to verify that the party does. And what we would do as a community is, set a goal to have this done so that we can all leverage this feature. So in the long term, this problem still exists. In the short term, the community, will be a little bit more organized in how it gets there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Stephen, your hand's up.
Yeah, you're missing a period on the rotating party is expected to receive messages. What about the other party? What's their expectation on saving? How long they should keep the other and existing messages? Is there any requirement there, or should there be any statement made about that?
So this is the reasonable period of discussion that we had last week too. So we adjusted the language so that it must extend at least until the following ACK message has been received. So there's a minimum amount for that reasonable period.
And that makes sense for the rotating party. I'm thinking
right.
of, yeah.
But for the observing party,
Yeah.
I think this means you just switch immediately. That you just begin using the new one and don't use the old one anymore. As soon as you receive the rotate message and you ACK it back, then you go into full.
Yeah, I meant isn't there a possibility of receiving messages? That's the only thing I wondered about. Like if you're receiving
of out of order receiving messages.
Yeah, out auth crypt, if there's anything that needs to be said about that. And basically what I'm wondering is, does that mean a receiving party has to figure out, oh, I've got to make sure I have synonyms for all of these keys to match? Or do they just ignore that? That was the only thing I was thinking about was, does the observing party have to do anything other than just say, oh, I'm never going to get another one from them?
It depends a little bit on if this is a sufficiency of robustness question.
Yeah.
Right. Where in theory, there definitely needs to be sort of a double commit type of a thing here to make sure that nothing ever falls on the floor, because and so it's like, how much is good enough type of a situation. My inclination is that these types of rotations, since they're actually happening, are going to happen when people are using software but not necessarily engaged. It was like smack in the middle of an interaction. New interactions, for example, can of course use new did methods, which means it doesn't really have an impact on those. It's the existing connections, and lots of those are going to be updated as software. A new mobile app, for example, is released. It loads, recognizing existing relationships using unqualified dids, and then sort of proactively sends these things out, which means that they're not going to be happening really very close in proximity to a lot of other interactions. And so also given the fact that message delivery is mostly reliable in our experience, in the sense that most messages tend to get to where they need to be, and out of order is a little bit rare. I'm inclined to say that we don't need to specifically handle that at this point. If someone thinks I'm dumb, like my opinion is poor there, I'd sure love to hear that. And certainly this allows for robust implementations to preserve and manage that. I could add a note similar to this timing to the ACK message as well, that would kind of indicate that behavior is possible by the observing party. And that could highlight the fact that if someone does have a situation where they have high enough message volume that it's likely to be an issue, that they could be aware of that. Does that seem like a good idea?
Think of what definitive guidance there would be for someone receiving this message. You're going to receive the message, you're going to process it, and it's going to go away. You don't want to write a bunch of extra code to, go clean up all the ones you saved. But if you've got to wait till the ACK is, I don't know. It's just, I'm not sure quite what the guidance should be. But anyway.
I don't know exactly what the guidance should be either.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to add myself a note here.
And it's not so much about a reasonable time as to what they should implement. It's more guidance for what they should implement.
Like the implications of moving from one to another in any stored messages.
Yeah, like if you immediately forget about anything that ever, the keys that went before, are you likely to run into any sort of issue?
Right. Let me try and add some guidance that at least calls attention to the issue, and then implementers can make their own decisions.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anyone? We've talked about a handful of pending changes. There was consensus around using the thread ID here as suggested by Ariel, which is really good. And then some additional notes about sort of handling. Is there anyone that is opposed to this being merged after those changes are made? Is there anyone that would like to make sure that they see this before this protocol is committed into the repository? So I'm about to say here in the commit, so please object if you do object, either in chat or everything else about merging this. Okay, I'll go ahead and make those updates then, and then we can go ahead and merge this protocol in just for the sake of moving things along. Okay, the next topic on our list, I'm going to pass over to you, Daniel. Do you want to screen share, or would you rather I did?
I can screen share.
Okay. To talk about did peer 4.
Okay, how's that look? I will go ahead and drop a link to this in the Zoom chat again. Screen share looking good? Yep. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll give some introduction to the method, and then hopefully we can spark some discussion from that. So this is the doc I put together outlining our proposed did peer Namago 4. This method is roughly equivalent, I would say, to did peer 2 plus did peer 3. So 2 plus 3 equals 4 in this case. It's kind of an evolution of all of the ideas that went into did peer 2 and 3. But as we've implemented and tried to use those methods, we've kind of discovered some shortcomings that we are attempting to address in this did-peer Namago 4. Specifically for did-peer 2, for instance, there were some parsing rules and encoding rules that resulted in an inability to keep like identifiers in verification methods, for example, and that was limiting and confusing in a lot of cases for how we express like what should the identifier be for the resolved document for those verification methods. And that was solved in various numbers of ways, but it wasn't consistent. So that was an issue. And the did-peer 3 itself sought to solve the problem of did-peer 2 being kind of long to include in every message in did-comb2 after you only need to really communicate the document component of it once. So did-peer 3 was intended to solve that problem, but we think it's cleaner to just kind of combine that all into a single method, which is did-peer 4 here, which is, it contains a short form and a long form, where the long form contains the full document and the short form is a hash over that document that you can use as an alias to the long form version of the did after it has been communicated at least once. The key differences in how did-peer 4 does this as opposed to did-peer 2 is, rather than attempting to shorten the contents of the document at all, we just completely avoid that problem altogether. And we just encode directly the document, which resembles very closely a did document, but has some key differences that I outline here. But that document itself is just encoded and just put into the long form of the did. So the document that gets encoded, it omits an ID, since we're in the process of creating the did that is supposed to go into that field. All references within the document referring to other elements within the same document must be relative. And then the controller value for verification methods is omitted if the intended controller is our did that we're creating. You can still express controllers or verification methods controlled by other dids by including it, and the algorithm will leave those values in the resolved document. So to get a did-peer 4 did from our input document, we just JSON stringify the object without white space. My language here isn't strong enough. It should actually require that it be without white space, I think, just for the sake of consistency. So I'll remove that text there. And then we encode that string into UTF-8 bytes. Then we do a multi-codec JSON encoding and then multi-base base 58 BTC encoding of that value. And that is the encoded document. And then we take the hash of that value over the final encoded document, not the bytes of it or anything like that. We render the string itself as UTF-8 bytes, and then we take the multi-hash SHA-2 256 and encode it as base 58 as well. So we end up with a hash and an encoded document, and we can concatenate those values together using this template here, where it's just did-peer 4, then the hash, and then a colon, and then the encoded document. And an example, did-peer 4 did can be found here. So we have the 4, we have the multi-base 58 Z, we have the QM, which indicates that this is a SHA-2 256 encoded hash or digest. And that is the hash portion of the did, and then this long portion on the end is the encoded document in base 58. And then the short form of did-peer 4 is just omitting the encoded document off of the end. So then the process for taking that did-peer 4 did and resolving it is a matter of extracting the encoded document from the long form, and then which is basically just the inverse of the steps that were presented for encoding the document. And then we contextualize the document by inserting values relevant to the did that's resolving the document. So we take the did, and inserted at the ID of the root of the document. We also append to the also known as list the short form of the did. And then for each of the verification methods that don't already have a controller, we insert the did as the controller value. And then optionally, you can also turn relative references into absolute. That's not a requirement, since relative references are valid within the context of a did document and are understood to refer to the current document. So the input document that we took above, when it's resolved into the fully contextualized did document, will look something like this, with the ID being populated with the full did peer 4, also known as being populated with the short form, and then the IDs, in this case, I made the relative references absolute, so the full did peer 4 is in here, followed by a fragment all the way at the end. I'm not going to scroll all the way over to it, but it's there. Additionally, resolving the short form is also possible only if you've seen the long form of the did peer 4. So if you've resolved this document before, this also known as value is then resolvable if you store the document, the decoded document, or the long form of the did itself, and you can, it's up to the implementation how it wants to store those values and then determine what values it's pulling from in order to do the short form resolution. To resolve the short form, we take the long form, we do the decoding steps as described above, and then we contextualize the did document with the short form instead of the long form did. So that the short form ends up in the ID, the long form ends up in the also known as, and if you make the references absolute, those will be included in the IDs with the fragments on the end. But again, the absolute or relative to absolute is an optional step here. So that is the gist of did peer 4. Hopefully it was clear that the provenance, I suppose, of the method, it shares a lot in common with did peer 2 and did peer 3, but we think it's just a little bit better, a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier and more straightforward to implement. I've got a couple of frequently asked questions that I'll address here briefly. So why base 58 encoding for the document? That is mostly to avoid questions of base 64 URL safe across languages. That's inconsistent. In Python, you include padding on the end. In JavaScript, the padding is not included on the end. So to just avoid that altogether, we're just doing base 58. Another question you might ask is, that long form is really long. Can we do something about that? Can we shorten it? Short answer is, we don't think that's necessary because you'll just rotate to the short form anyways, or not rotate necessarily, but you'll use the short form as an alias to the long form. So rather than implementing some picky parsing rules for shortening values or anything like that, we think it's better to just keep it simple, straightforward, and easy to implement. What's wrong with did peer 2 and 3? That's something I think we can discuss here. And why use multi-base and multi-hash, multi-codec? I think this just keeps our options open if we want to switch out for using a different hash over the long form for the short form. We have that option, and the identifier itself is self-descriptive, so there's pretty minimal changes there to the handling of those values. So I think it's just a good baseline. Self-descriptive identifiers won't hurt us, so I think it's fair to use them. So in the issue that I raised on did peer 4, proposing it, there were some good questions, I think, such as why not just make this did peer 3 instead of having did peer 4, since nobody's actually implemented did peer 3 yet. But yeah, so there's I guess the kicking off point for discussion at this point.
Stephen, hands up.
Okay, a couple of questions. I think I know the answer to this, but I'd like to ask it explicitly. Why not swap the ID and also known as, so that the ID is the short form, the also known as is the long form? Did you think about that? And
Yes, Sam and I had a long discussion about this, and what it comes down to is I think it is cleaner for the ID of the resolved document to match the value that you put into the black box resolution interface, if that makes sense. So I attempted to resolve the short form, so I got back a document with an ID in the short form. I resolve the long form, I get back a document with an ID that is the long form. And so there's a bidirectional mapping between these two values, assuming you've stored the long form and can resolve the short form. And so by expressing, also known as, for the long form document to be the short form, and then the inverse for the short form resolved document, we say that there's a strong relationship between these two. They represent the same did subject, but they are technically independent, separate documents.
Okay. Second question, wouldn't it be better just to encourage in the spec using the fragments in the various sections of the doc rather than using the absolute? Or is that?
So when we resolve the document, not going to using absolute references.
Yeah,
even
so
though
to
we started from
contextualize,
relative.
just leave that off and say, you know, explicitly just don't do it. But I mean, I guess it's purely an internal question, but
Yeah.
Just makes logs, log files really long and harder to use. So it just makes everything harder to use, in my opinion, even though it is just internal.
Yeah. That's a fair question. Sam and I also discussed that. And I think you've basically come to the same conclusion that we did, was that this is probably more an implementation detail or which is, maybe we could change the language here to be a little bit more explicit, or rather just omit it altogether. An implementation might require that the did URL reference might be absolute before it attempts to dereference the value. It might not.
But that wouldn't be spec compliant, did spec compliant. So
So
I think it's better to say don't do it, because it's just going to cause yourself grief.
What about it would be non-did spec compliant?
The did spec allows for relative references.
Right.
So if you don't support that, if your implementation of dids doesn't support that, that would be non-compliant. So
my
make it
thought was
easier on
that
yourself.
My thought was that we changed the language to prefer relative, and then change the examples as well. But I'll of course allow it to be fully derelativized if necessary. It really is an implementation detail, but I think that angling the spec to sort of prefer or recommend the relative references is better.
I would say something like, well, not recommended, an implementation could. That might be sufficiently pushing against it. But as I say, I think the biggest thing would be in logs and things like that. You're just making it harder for developers.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that doesn't substantially change the way most of the spec works.
No.
So I think that's a pretty simple change. So
yeah, that one's just
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah. And then just the last thing was it might be worth putting a little note by the Genesis document to say that note that the ID is not included in the Genesis document, that is addressed later or something like that, just so people don't look at that and say that's not a proper did doc.
Right. I do have some discussion here in terms of what is different
Oh
between
yeah,
the input document.
There it is. Okay.
Yep.
I had gone back to it to look for it. I was looking at it as a follow-up note, but good. Okay. Sorry about that.
Nope, no problem.
Awesome. Nice work.
Thanks.
I'll quickly offer that as the author of did peer 2 and 3, although lots of 3 was like community discussion things, I'm wholesale a fan of this, and deprecating the other ones. I think this is a much more straightforward approach. It down in the discussion of what's better about this than 2 and 3, I think it's accurate. sometimes it takes a little while to come to the right idea about how to make things like this work. I should also mention that the concept of having a short form and long form is not an original idea. That was borrowed from or inspired by Did Ion, which does a similar thing but not using the same method that we are. And so this is I believe the most straightforward way of doing peer dids that I can currently imagine.
So to voice the question once again for Timo on his behalf, nobody's implemented did peer 3. Should we just drop did peer 3 and turn what is did peer 4 into did peer 3?
I will love that. Yeah, because it will be confusing for everybody. You will have a useless method because nobody will implement it. So I don't know why we cannot just.
The plan is to update the spec to deprecate 0, 1, 2, and 3 once this is in place. So it shouldn't be confusing in that we're saying don't use these other ones. It's not going to be an option to use any sort of recommendation to use any of the other ones except this.
Yeah, it'll be officially deprecated. To expand that just a little, Daniel Hardman, who wrote Did Peer 1, is in favor of it being deprecated. In method 0 has never really been used and kind of existed as a weird compatibility layer with did key. So the recommendation is that we actually deprecate, still include the documentation, but move it to like an appendix and reference it as deprecated. The implementation details of 0, 1, 2, and 3, which means that 4 would be the only remaining did peer numalgo in current use.
I would add, we just did a merge today that removes a lot of the extra text that was aspirational when Daniel wrote it, but never implemented things like updates and CRDT and all of those things. Those have all been removed from the spec already in anticipation of, well, I mean, that stands alone that, we're not going to implement that. We're going to use did rotation, as Sam talked about earlier. So updating is not ever going to happen based on our practical experience. And then same idea, did 0 has never been done. It did key is perfectly good, so no need for did 0. And 1, 2, and 3 are replaced by this. Yeah.
Well, and to Kim's point in the chat, we already defined V3. Had I not committed V3 into the repo itself, this could be called 3, and that would have been better. But we were just moving along and figuring things out at the time, and so the fact that it's 4 is a little bit of an accident of the timeline, but it's definitely the cleanest thing to do.
I don't really have anything else to say. Sorry,
yeah,
I'll just yield screen share here. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question, like, so whoever's currently implementing V3 should stop and go to V4, or what's the idea?
That's what I think, but we definitely care what everyone thinks.
Okay. Yeah, because we had this. I'm not so involved in the development of AFJ right now, but I think we had this discussion about V3 and should we implement it and how and when. And yeah, now I was a bit confused, like if we should then finish it or throw it away or how to proceed. But yeah, I guess that's I would expect to go directly to V4.
Actually, what we were implementing is the did peer 2 into the did exchange. and I think the same was for Aries VCX. So yeah, maybe the answer is the same, right? I mean, we have to drop this peer 2 support and just go to the peer 4, probably.
Okay.
I feel like I have to apologize for the thrashing a little bit on this. As we've been trying to figure this out, we've gotten smarter, and I believe that the solution of did peer 4 plus did rotation and did conv v1 is a substantially better solution than what we've discussed before, but it does feel like things have moved around a lot. I totally acknowledge that. If I had a time machine, I'd fix it, but mine broke. But I do acknowledge that it feels like a lot of stuff has moved as we've had this under discussion. But I feel like our efforts together as a community have gotten us to some place that's substantially better than where we started. We're at the end of the hour. Any comment? Any other comments, questions, thoughts? Thank you everyone for coming. Appreciate the discussion today, and Daniel's work and all the discussions and that people have had that have helped make things better. We didn't get to push notifications, Stephen, and so we'll be able to follow up on that next week. But thank you all for coming, and keep up the good work. We'll keep moving things forward. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.